Hey guys, hope you are well, and we are back with another Elite Coach Live. Each month we do a special ECL around a specific topic, typical theme. So we've done sports therapy, we've done gym owners. This month we're going to be digging into what it's all about working with youth athletes, and who better to reach out to than the guys down at Cornwall High Performance, joined by one of them, Sam Guy. I met these guys in 2015 now. You know, that is scary when you say that out loud. And they traveled a long way. Cornwall is a long way from well, anywhere really. But these guys were absolutely dedicated to the craft, and the reaping rewards. I've been following from afar, and they're doing some really, really good stuff. So I'm really, really excited to get one of the dynamic duo on tonight. Mr. Sam Guy, how we doing, sir? We all good?
Hey, Steve. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, mate. All very, very, very well down here. Nice and busy. Normality sort of resumed. So, yeah, really kind of happy to be here today and running through this sort of stuff.
Good man, good man. So for anybody that doesn't really know about Cornwall High Performance, mate, do you want to just give us a brief snapshot on what is Cornwall High Performance, mate?
Yeah, so we got going in the year, I think that we met Steve actually on one of the mentorships, which was sort of back end of 2014, right at the start of 2015. And we wanted to bring high quality coaching to all populations, athletes, non-athletes, youth, older generation, whoever wanted coaching, whoever wanted to get better, we were there to deliver the gold. And as the years progressed, we sort of specialized predominantly in the youth market. We started our Child Champion program, as it's known, in 2017. And sort of 5 years later and a 2-year pandemic, we are sort of 60, 70 plus kids training with us anywhere between once and 3 times per week. So that runs over kind of sort of anywhere between 10 and 15 hours a week, probably a little bit more actually of youth coaching and various other bits and bobs with kind of sort of clubs and individuals as well. And said, yeah, we've still got a nice kind of handful of kind of general pop and athletes as well that we work with. So yeah, we're super busy on that coaching front and just continuing to hit that hard.
Nice, mate. Nice. And just want to go back a little bit into that kind of getting stuck into that youth bit, because you said, was it the Little Groms or Groms program that you set up? It was like, what was that? It was an S&C for young surfers, wasn't it, in the area? Was that right?
It was, mate. You have, yeah, well remembered. We think some point I think it must have been back end of 2016, the summer of 2016, we got approached by a guy called Joel Gray from Surf Solutions, and he's basically a coaching outfit in Cornwall that looks after any kind of up and coming, very decent surfer from quite a young age, really. He's got kind of groms on from sort of 7, 8 years old all the way through to the sort of adulthood. And yeah, we'd been in communications with him. We didn't know him overly well, but he wanted to get his kind of 10, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds into a little bit of kind of introduction into S&C, basically. And we ran the sessions over a weekend, kind of 2 hours each day, 4 hours in total. And yeah, it struck a chord with myself and Rob, really. And we were like, these guys are like awesome in the water, but you get them in the gym and it just doesn't marry up. You know, they're lacking the ability to jump, land, squat, push, pull, rotate, all the basics that we look at as coaches. And that was where the idea was sparked and rolled kind of 4 or 5 months later down the line, when we'd sort of formulated a very loose plan at the time, mate, to get going with what was our first youth program in January 2017. And yeah, the Groms and Joel were the catalyst for that.
Nice, mate. Nice. And what was it? Obviously, I know there was that bit disparity between the water and the basic fundamental movements, but what made you sort of think, what made you sit down, Rob, and go, actually, we're onto something here. This is what is exciting to us? Because obviously coaching is a labor of love at times. It's a bit of a slog, you know? So yeah. What was it that sort of got you excited about the youth stuff? What is it that dragged you in?
I think when you're working with someone at that age, you can mold them and adapt them into better, not only better athletes, but better humans as well. So I think that was one of the first things that we basically picked up, is like, we've got an opportunity here to have a massive impact on whoever it is that's in front of us, that we can educate them on how to move properly, how to load, how to lift, but also all the holistic stuff that goes around that as well, teaching them, or certainly aiding in teaching them all the basics of consistency and graft and turning up when you don't really want to, and all those things. So it was the opportunity to impact someone young's life for the better.
Yeah.
And then from the physical perspective, it was just the gap was there, mate. Like we're just seeing, like I said, really kind of poor movement skills outside of what they were doing in the water. And of course, they enjoyed the weekend as well, which is probably the most important thing, right? Mm-hmm. So when you put those 3 points together, you're thinking we can create something here of huge value.
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. That's really, really cool. And did you have much resistance from like parents or anything like that when it came to the gym? Did they really know what they were getting involved with, or were they just sort of jumping in with both feet, so to say?
Well, I think when we initially put the advert out, so roll to 2017, January, again, we didn't have the knowledge on marketing and business running as we do now. And alongside Cornwall High Performance, we're working with coaches who want to set up similar stuff. And we feel like, that's a massive area we have grown in these last 7 years. So we put out an advert and we thought, right, what's the best way to break down, bust the myths that kids can't lift and bust the myths all around that, but also hammer home the importance of a good S&C program, kind of what it is and what it isn't. So covering all these things, these common misconceptions, as well as trying to promote what we're doing. And we I think if memory serves me right, we advertised for a kind of a series of presentations. So me and Rob had put together kind of a very basic sort of 15, 20-minute PowerPoint presentation that we were going to deliver to parents for free on the benefits of youth S&C. And we managed to get sort of, I can't remember how many, but probably the best part of 20 to 25, 30 parents in a room over 3 or 4 nights and delivered this S&C seminar and a little live kind of session. One of them we did in a university kind of, bar. It was all really kind of right. We didn't have a facility back then. And yeah, that's how we started to build that trust with parents by breaking down what they perceived the gym to look like for kids and actually what it should look like and showing them the research and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, we went from there basically with it. Yeah. And going to your point about breaking down those barriers, I think I've certainly noticed as the years have gone on that people do have an understanding of youth training now. It wasn't like it was maybe 10 or 15 years ago, maybe even sooner than that, where there was this myth of stunted growth and this and that. We're now getting parents actively contact us regularly going, my son or daughter needs to improve their full body strength for their sport. So it's changing, mate. It's changing face. And it already has changed since the 7 years that we've worked, 7 years that we've worked in it.
Yeah. And I think that what's interesting, I want to just pick up a little point on there for anybody watching it is they didn't just put an advert out and then that was it. It was like bit of grind, bit of hustle, going out, making it work, getting the presentations. It wasn't just some fancy Facebook ad algorithm or whatever it may be. It was speaking to people and getting in front of people. So anybody that's watching this now, like that stuff works, building connections. And I think when you're working with kids and you've got to build the connection with the parents as well as the child, it's sort of like a double whammy relationship builder as a coach. So anybody that's looking at that, I think, don't underestimate the importance of just getting out and speaking and trying to educate. You might know the benefits, but if some parent doesn't, or it can be misguided or think about this, think about that, then you just have to get out there and get in front of them, which I think is an important thing, which I just really want to pick up on that, because it's people are looking for the shortcut sometimes, aren't they, for growing a youth business, and it doesn't work.
We could do a whole separate interview just on the business side of things, like it's that in depth. But you're absolutely right. I think one thing me and Rob have done really well from the start is the hustle ability. It's getting in people's faces, talking to people. That's your customer, and trying to communicate with them the things that you want to get across, and listening to their messages coming back, and then meeting them in the middle. And like you said, you can bang out the best Facebook advert in the world, but if you can't communicate your message across to different people in different positions from different backgrounds, then you're going to struggle. So it's a really important point. As I said, so much so you could do a whole separate conversation on that sort of thing.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. So part of that education process, and something that I'm very big on, and we try and educate a lot of people in the Elite Coach Network and within SCE, is that philosophy piece. So when you're speaking to parents and stuff, what is the main thing that you're putting across? Because obviously you're putting across Cornwall High Performance's coaching philosophy, right? Your approach and stuff like. Do you want to dig into a bit of like what is your coaching philosophy and what it is that you're going to like offer these kids?
Yeah, I mean, the thing to start with is it once you're getting going, it's harder because you haven't got the social proofing behind you. I think now we're starting to reap the rewards of having 7 years of being in Cornwall and running this. So we get a lot of people that already know who we are and what we're about. But when you start out, people don't know that. And then if they're coming to a taster session or to have a chat with you, if you don't have kids there and then in the room training, you've got to paint that picture. We're now very fortunate that we've got a good system in place. Either advert goes out, someone sees that, book in for a free taster, come along on a night where we're already running. In this facility behind me, there'll be 10, 12 kids lifting. So they probably pick up a lot from that. But what we tend to do is we get the individual in. We'll obviously let them soak up the atmosphere. We'll ask them, what drove them to this position? Because there had been something that would have driven them to that. And that's the start point, really. So my son or daughter wants to get stronger for their sport. Right, this is how we go about it. We're going to explain how it's going to work. We'll break down any myths, common misconceptions that they may have. And the big one for us, Steve, and you just talked about is, yes, we're teaching these guys how to move, but it's way deeper than that. We want them to leave it 16, 18 years old with whatever age they go with, the skills to go into a gym at university or college and be able to put themselves through an effective warm-up and then take themselves into a really, really good training session. We want them to know how to fuel themselves correctly, recover correctly, but actually, most importantly, learn some important skills for life. Consistency, turning up when you don't want to do it, the graft, the day in, the day out, the slog stuff that people don't see, and relate that to the fact that when they get a job or they're, doing whatever, that all those same skills are going to be needed to be successful. So yeah, teaching them all the in-gym skills, all this, the importance of nutrition, but actually the most important one is the skills required for a successful life, basically. So that's what we try and get across to the parent in the however long they're sat in front of us. Often they're there for the hour, but sometimes it's 20 minutes. And even when they sign up, we still spend quite a lot of time after that educating them for that next 90 days, really, until they're up to scratch with where we are at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about just putting that standards across. And I think it is something that's really important to do. We always look on the outcomes of, what is strength? I want to do this. They need to get faster, need to get that. But it's those soft skills that create the athlete. I think Vern Gambetta said it great a few weeks back, is you've got ability and talent are very, very different. Talent is ability, but it's the discipline, it's the work ethic, it's the attitude, it's the camaraderie, supporting teammates. Ability, anybody can have decent abilities, natural abilities or God-given talents, whatever you want to call it, but actually harnessing talent is a skill in itself, and that's where coaching really comes in. So it sounds like you're doing great stuff down there, which is just fantastic to see.
A lot of our culture is picked up by the parents straight away because of the etiquette of the current crew. But that said, that's been compounded over 7 years. We've built that culture, but now the culture is within the session. So anyone new comes in, they're going to have to be forced into that way, like all the things you've just said there. Looking out for each other, the effort, the discipline, the respect, everything's already in place now. And so it's a great place for us to be, because we can actually take a new person in and they're going to then see that and learn behavior and all that. They're going to have to slip into that mindset. So yeah, it's takes a bit of time, but well worth.
So I want to just go back a little bit, because obviously you've got, before we jump into the facility that you've got now. So previously you were working out of, was it a college or a university gym? It was quite a small space, wasn't it? Where you were thinking, right, we could do a couple of broad jumps, but we're kind of going to run out of space a little bit here and stuff like that. How did you go about creating that same culture that you've got in your facility now in that small environment that you were in?
I can't remember who said something along the lines of high performance isn't a facility, it's a mindset. Yeah. And you could train really, I'll say anywhere, but you probably couldn't train anywhere. It's got to match the mindset somewhat, but you could train as long as it's safe and effective. You can train anywhere. It's the mindset. But we started out at a college, which had a good little facility actually, but they didn't align with us, so they kind of messed us around a little bit, and we got to the point where we were really frustrated and it didn't match our standards. So then we're kind of using college once a week. We had a really kind of cool CrossFit box that we used. The owner was fantastic. He matched us, and so we managed to build sessions in there. But then we were a little bit spread out, and like you said, it can be hard or harder when, especially at the CrossFit facility, when there's CrossFit athletes ready to come in after our session and they're kind of walking in and stuff like that, and trying to keep run a tight ship with the kids program, or the youth program, as it probably should be said, was definitely difficult. But that was kind of crucial period where we could build up our program, our skill set, understand how we want to develop the program before we moved into here. So without that period of 2 or 3 years renting from different spaces, we probably wouldn't be in this position. So that was kind of key learning times for us to be adaptable. Yeah, basically between facilities and locations and dealing with other people before we came into here. And the fact that however we ran it at the time, basically then came, it was transferable to when we came into here, because we built that culture, built that community, and built those kind of key expectations of the kids. So no matter where they were training, they would still adhere to that, if that made sense.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting, because I think a lot of people try and think about, I can't get something started until I've got the perfect facility, or I can't do this. But actually, you've just highlighted there those 3 years of actually just to and fro and learning to be agile, what works well, what doesn't go well, just kind of making the mistakes, but also facing the problems. And then obviously that forced your hand to open the space. So to take us to the point of getting your space, mate, what was kind of the final tipping point? Was it just getting the ownership and just wanting to have somewhere you could call home?
Yeah, pretty much. Bear in mind, we moved in February 2020. So we still didn't really know what was about to happen. So in our mind, the youth program had grown to, I can't remember the numbers or sessions, if I'm honest, but we'd basically run out of space to grow in other facilities. And obviously Rob Palmer, the guy who owned the sort of little CrossFit box, we basically maximized our usage there. Yeah. And so it was a point where it was like, if we want to continue to grow, the only place now really is to get into our own facility. The fact we were paying quite a bit of money a month on rental suggested to us that when we take on a facility, as long as we're not stupid, the gap to be bridged is not much higher. Obviously, we had to equip it. So we bridged that gap of we basically made ourselves as anti-fragile as possible by that point. So we saw it as a bit of a no-brainer, really, because we could get all of our clientele, kids, athletes, you name it, under one roof. And then it allowed us to then build that youth program as well. So like I said, anyone sort of wanting to start out, the best thing is just to get going anywhere, really. Build that client base up until you have to then go into your own spot, but then you're not scratching around for rent each month because you've already got solid income, essentially. So I think we did it really, really well. It was well-timed and, fairly well-timed for obvious reasons. There was the least pressure on us, when we came in. We could afford the rent because we've been paying it already.
Yeah, and I think again that's just great advice, and it's absolute gold, this, mate. So, throughout the years that you've been going now, what would you say has been kind of the biggest problems that you've kind of faced? I know obviously you've had facility issues. Nobody could have predicted a global pandemic, But barring those, what was the biggest problems that you guys have faced over at CHP?
pandemic's the biggest problem we've faced. But at the same time, Steve, with big kind of adversity comes a lot of learning. So though we'll sort of skip the pandemic stuff because everyone's gone through it, I think some of our best learning has come in those real adverse moments where like, how I think, what's around the corner. So I think my actual biggest reflection since January has been, because you see lots of mentors out there, and I know like Brendan will talk about this, and loads of successful people will say, in your darkest moments is where your best learning comes from. And I think we'd had up until the pandemic, we hadn't faced massive amounts of adversity. Yeah, we had to graft for our business, but when we went through that, suddenly it's all stripped away from you. And that's some of the darker moments, like certainly not to start with, but later down the line when, again, the negativity of the pandemic had compounded. And I think like being able to stay resilient psychologically through that period and to trust in your product and in your offering and that things are going to get better. It sounds cheesy, but that's some of the biggest like learning that I've had. And I feel like I'm in such a stronger position as a business owner since the pandemic because of the pandemic. So I don't think you can just that's single-handedly the biggest obstacle we've had. And nothing basically comes close to it so far. Again, that's probably fairly obvious. The second point, going off what you've just kind of COVID aside, but with COVID interlinked as well, is I think stuff takes a long time to build, and like there's no magic pill out there. So the biggest learning for me and the biggest kind of obstacle is to turn up every day. It sounds really basic, but I think people can motivate themselves for like a month or a couple of months, maybe 6 months, to be able to do it for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. When you're making really steady but small improvements, is quite a challenge. But when you reflect back on the progress you've made over that period of time, in the micro, it seems quite small, but those small steps every day make a big leap. And like I said to you at the start of the conversation, we're starting to reap some nice rewards now. The business is growing quite a lot, but it's nothing to do with what we've been doing in this last 6 months. It's the work we started back in 2015 when we met you. And so, again, people watching, it's like if you're going to embark on a business venture or coaching venture, whatever it is, like it's going to be a minimum of 5 years. It's going to be 5 to 10 years before you start seeing any of those rewards. But when you do start to see them, it's a pretty damn cool feeling.
Yeah.
And for me, the biggest obstacle is actually day-to-day, Steve. It's day-to-day because it's mundane, isn't it, at times? Yeah. You just said coaching's a bit of it's a bit of a labor. It is. But if you've got a vision and you've got a plan, and you can feel within the market and within the noise that you're receiving from external people is right, that's a good enough signal to keep going, and you will reap those rewards at a given point.
No, mate, it really rings true, and I think ultimately, again, it is being about consistency, being patient with it, and not just changing it because it hasn't worked for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Understand that it is a long-term commitment. And I think Gary Vee said something really interesting a few weeks back. You might have seen it when he said fitness entrepreneurs really cracked me up, because he said they've got the fitness side of it nailed down. They've got the diet, they've got the training, and they know that there's no shortcut. They know that they just have to turn up day in, day out, do all of the mundane stuff to get the great results. But he said when they come over to the business side of it, it's like, what's the shortcut? What's this? It's like, but you already know that there's no shortcut, mate. You already know that you need to put in the graft, and it is about being consistent. And I think it speaks true. We're always looking for shortcuts in areas that we don't necessarily feel confident with, So, yeah, turning up consistently.
Yeah, and there is you will learn things within that. Like you will understand advertising better, you will understand your customer better, but you do that by doing. And it doesn't always slap you in the face. You don't always get the aha moment like there and then, but because you're consistent and you're true to what you believe in, you make those learnings anyway. So they happen naturally because certain circumstances happen, certain moments in the business where you have to understand something better because something's happened. And so you get a lot of the business learning as you go. So again, it comes back to, like you said, being consistent is so basic, but I truly believe it more than ever, because I've done seven years as a business owner and coach for CHP anyway, and I'm starting to see fruits of the labor now. And so I'm obviously doing a lot of reflecting on what we've done, and the best thing we've done is basically turned up every single day. That's it.
Yeah.
In a nutshell. So that's it's not exciting, it's not sexy, but it's my massive take home for people that are looking to enter the world of either youth coaching under their own umbrella, basically, under their own name.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. So obviously, business aside and looking at the core program, so what does that kind of look like for you guys now? Do you have sort of a tiered system, or say if a new joiner jumps into a program, how does that? Let's dig into that kind of the nitty gritty, the nerdy stuff of that development. Yeah. So what does kind of the CHP's performance program look like, mate?
So I don't know if we chatted about this before, but we kind of go off a foundation development, high performance kind of pyramid. Yeah. So when anyone comes in, we've got to build those foundational skills. We don't have, I know that Rob Anderson, for example, Rob Anderson, who's now running something similar to us in Scotland with his athlete academy, he's got very much set parameters with right, once you can do X, Y, and Z, you've graduated your development phase and into foundation phase. We're a little bit sort of more ad hoc with that, but still the same thing remains. When you come in, you have to go through that development phase, and we make that very, very clear to the athletes straight away that they're going to be learning how to squat with body weight, push up, TRX row, inverted row, rotate, jump, land, pogo, skip, coordinate, all those kind of basic movements. I've got a pyramid somewhere. I'm happy to send it if you want it as a reference for people that are listening. Once they've built that, what we call that foundational bottom of the pyramid movement, we can then start to layer in what we call the foundational phase, which is that middle bit of the pyramid. And it's basically working on the same stuff, but starting to add load, starting to get stronger, starting to add some complexity. So we might then start being into goblet squats and front squats. We might be into loading the trap bar and hitting a bit of body weight on that. We might now be into some, learning how to accelerate and run at top speed and that sort of stuff, layering on from those coordination game challenges in that foundation phase. And then really once they're into 2, 3, 4 years of training, they're then going into that, what we call, it's called high performance on there, but we all know really there's no such thing, is there, Steve? It's basically two times body weight on your deadlift and that sort of stuff, and starting to maybe dial in a little bit more into what they need specifically. So it could be, I'm going to use an example of an athlete we've got now, 5 years with us, female, 2 to 3 times a week. We're looking now at developing her sort of power output, speed output, some specific position, some specific movements for her sport, a little bit more than we would for someone who's brand new. So there's the difference between the two. Brand new newbie gets all the basic movements. This said individual, we're starting to dial in a little bit more now. Strength isn't so much of an issue. She's like twice body weight on deadlift and squats like body weight and a half and all that sort of stuff. So it's like, can we dial in a little bit more to some key metrics? But she's earned the right to get to that point. So that's roughly kind of in a quick minute of how we structure the nuts and the bolts of the program. So I would try to dig into like the integration, because I think there's I get fascinated about this, because obviously you get some kids who say that female youth athlete's been with you for 5 years, and she might bring and then a friend along or something along those lines who has done no S&C training. How do you find that integration? What sort of tips and tricks, or if there's anything that you've got in terms of that integration? Because that's one thing that's always, it's always not a sticking point. It's not a challenge as such, but it's always one of those that when somebody new comes in, it's like, why am I doing this and they're doing that? And I know there's the education bit, but how do you guys handle that integration with a new athlete of somebody with a similar age? Again, anyone we work with who wants to set this sort of thing up, it all starts back at what do you want the program to look like? Because if I run it, Steve, and had 20 athletes in here, I'm not going to be able to do that. But we wanted to create a high performance environment where the guys could learn. So it starts with, right, how many coaches are there? So let's use us as an example, prime example. Me and Rob, right, 2. Right, what's the size of the facility? Well, it's about 900 square feet. Right, how many people can we fit into here? 10, maybe 12 on a nice summer's day where we can get the shutters up and we can get some work outside. Right, so what does that mean? That means 1 coach to 6 athletes, okay? So that's just so that, in my eyes, deems a really nice coach to athlete ratio where someone comes in, they're going to get watched, they're going to get looked at, they're going to get coached, they're going to improve. So once you've got that dialed, you can then start to learn or work out how to integrate. So with us, if someone, right, so let's say someone new starts, right? So we've got 10 sessions a week. Anyone can book on any session. They're capped at 10. The system is capped at 10 people. Sometimes open it up a little bit more, but let's just use 10 as an example. So I've got 9 athletes that have come in that are regulars with us, and then we've got the 1 newbie. So what we look to do with the newbie is we start on the board. So I've got my board right over there now. So we chuck them into the warm-up, and I say to them, first thing I always say to someone in the warm-up, because we warm up as a group, I say, don't worry at all, relax. You don't know any of the stuff, like, looks a bit funky, don't worry. Every single person in here started there. I'll come over and I'll start coaching you a little bit through those movements. Go through the warm-up. I'm watching them for their coordination skills, their mobility skills, their stability skills, how they're interacting with the group, how quickly they're picking stuff up. So it started immediately. And the learning for them started immediately. Obviously, the rest of the group are quite competent. So we've gone through the warm-up. We're now into what we would call the main session. Now, for anyone that's been with us, let's say longer than about 2 to 3 months, is now on the laptop. So we've basically educated them enough on how to manage their program, how to load, how to read the program, and how to basically go about basic competency in the gym. So I'll do is I'll let all the other 9 jump on the 2 laptops, let them get figured out what they need to do. That might take 2 to 3 minutes, might get a few questions. Sam, what's X, Y, and Z if it's a new program, so deal with that. Then one of me or Rob will then coach and look after the other 9 and keep an eye on them and make sure that they're loading and doing things correctly. There's always questions, right? It never changes. And then the other will look after the newbie. We'll go over to the board and we'll explain, right, have a look around you. They all started with what you're going to start. So bodyweight squat might be goblet squat in a few months, might be front squat, might be back squat. By that point, Holly might be back squatting at that point and say, right, you might be there in a couple of years' time, but right now we're going to go back to the basics. And what I like to do is basically dial in all those core warm-up drills back into the session. So basically, they just learn our warm-up stuff, maybe a little bit more dynamically. So that might be your bodyweight squat, your lunge patterns, your jump and land patterns, your pogos, your Spider-Man with reach, so your sort of coordination challenges. And that's where it starts for them, really. And we start building up those basic motor patterns, that coordination ability, that just self-awareness of the body. 3, 4, 5 weeks, depending on the athlete. And then we start to give them a little bit more structure. So it might be goblet squat into TRX row into dead bug, and then rear lunge into press up into a core drill or something like that. And you can see then that's where it starts to go. And then all along that, we're just starting to advance their plyometric explosive activity work. So it might start as a basic learning how to decelerate. That then might progress into box jump. Low pogo might progress into, medium-sized pogos, and we're bringing in the med ball work and building those competency levels of all those basic movements up a little notch each week. And before they know it, 6 to 8 weeks later, they're integrated. They know the warm-up because we've been working on it in the main session, and they're starting to know and understand what those basic foundational skills look like. And what I'm talking about predominantly there is squat, lunge, TRX row, press up, dead bug, jumping, landing, pogo, skips, Spider-Man with reach, all those sorts of things. That's those real basics. I want to get into those guys really early. And then they basically allow the layer of strength and power and movement to start building. So that's roughly how we integrate. And I think it works really well because they get to see 4 or 5 or however many guys in there that are really competent. They get to see that whilst. So that genuinely happens. A kid's goblet squatting whilst 2 kids are back squatting body weight, whilst 2 guys are doing trap bar deadlift with 100 plus kilos on. That happens every session.
Yeah.
And then you can use that as a pivot point and say, look, they haven't just come in and just magically done that. They've started exactly where you are right now. So if you stick with it, you're going to be there in 6 or 9 months' time.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's really cool. I like the way that you're giving a bit of ownership to the guys who are a little bit more experienced, and also taking ownership of the situation where they are now for the beginners. It's really cool, because I think ownership is a big thing. We need structured training, but kids need that little bit of autonomy and that kind of feeling like they're taking ownership of that program and that process. That's really.
But it goes back to your earlier point to me about when you said earlier about what do you say to the parents and how do you get across your mission and your philosophy. Well, one of our philosophies is that we want them to be able to leave competent. So we have to start giving ownership. Otherwise, we're not true to our mission as a business and coaches. So it all links back in with that and what you want. And that's why I said at the start of this why it's so important to work out what sort of program you want before you start embarking on it. Because if you've got 25 kids and one coach in a sports hall, that's not going to be, you're not going to be able to deliver that sort of coaching which I've just described. So it's all got to marry up.
Yeah, no, like do the groundwork, and that's why it is just spending that time and thinking, what do I want this to look like, mate?
Yeah.
Which is really, really valuable. So, mate, I've taken up a lot of your time there, mate, but I've just got kind of one final kind of question, and it'll probably come into 10 minutes itself anyway, as it always does. But basically, there's always a lot of people that join SCE and they get started. They've been a PT for a few years, or they've just been a sports coach. They've got a passion. They like the idea of working with young people. So where do you feel is the key areas? What's the big rocks that you think they should tackle in order for them to get started with working with youth programs, potentially to then in 5, 6, 7 years to be in the same position as yourself and Rob and the rest of the guys down at CHP?
I think you've got to be. There's a couple of things. They probably run congruently, Steve. The first one, and it's already come up. I think everything's going to come up already. Is that taking action? Like, I'm not worthy. I'm not ready. It's not perfect. That's just BS, right? If you want to start working, you've got to get something going, no matter what it looks like. Because again, like we said earlier, there's going to be a huge learning effect in that. You might start something and go, whoa, I don't want 25 kids, so I'm going to change it. So already you're going to get a learning effect. It's not failing, it's learning and helping you build your craft towards what you're going to learn to build the craft that you want. So that's the first one. Get going, whatever format it is. Get down to your local sports club and chatting with the football coach for the under-13s. Get in there and try and deliver, even if you're not confident on it, because you'll learn so much on the job. So number one is start taking action, no matter how imperfect or imperfect that looks. Second one is you've got to be a master of your craft, haven't you? So you do need to upskill your coaching skill set as much as possible. So getting on with you guys is the absolute perfect springboard for them to bring those coaching skill set as high as they can. Because ultimately you want to know how to do all those things that you're going to be teaching. And if you're not comfortable and confident with that, then you're going to struggle. But the two go hand in hand. So upskilling your coaching toolbox, get going with taking action with working with people. I think those two things, Steve, if you stuck at just them two for 5 years, you're going to have a good idea. But I think there's one more thing you need to bring into, there's probably many more things you need to bring into action. But for the purpose of the question, you've got to get your marketing, your business skills up as well. So once you've taken action, once you're developing your skill set as a coach and you feel like you're maximizing that, and that should always be a constant, so should the business and marketing skills as well. Get on courses, get learning about advertising, get learning about value propositions and unique selling points and what your program offers and how you can differentiate yourself in a saturated market. You've got to learn all of that, because if you're a good coach but you've got no clients, what use are you? So take action, get yourself upskilled as high as you can as a coach in the nuts and bolts of coaching, and then start learning deeply on marketing and business. And you won't go wrong with those three. Yeah.
No, it's great advice. And I think a lot of people can take away from that. And I think, absolutely spot on ones to crack. And it's always amazing how business and education seems to fall down the list on a coach's next course that I'm going to do. I'm going to go and do a webinar on isometric training, which is all valuable, but yet they haven't done anything on the business, and it's always the great coaches get left behind at times, don't they?
From what I see, Steve, again, we come in a lot of contact with a lot of coaches. Most of them have done one of those three things, which is the CPD. Majority of them are UKSCA accredited, X amount of years experience within a club or multiple clubs. They have all of those. They have that. That bucket is overflowing. The water's coming right out the top. But the Taking Action bucket under their own name, under their own esteem, and the marketing and business buckets are completely empty. So that's the buckets that most people need to go and fill. It's not obviously the case for everyone, but that's my experience. So I think if a lot of coaches went and filled those two buckets, they would have, sort of working freedom and financial freedom, really.
Yeah. And it goes back to what we very said in the very beginning as well. Is it is a compound effect. It's you can't just go to the well once with this bucket and think that you can just do one thing and it'll fill it. It's constantly. It's almost like you've got a big, massive water butt at the bottom of the garden at times, and it feels like you put an espresso cup full of water in each time, doesn't it?
Yeah,
But that's it. You've got to be constantly filling it, and it will take time. But mate, that's been an absolute fantastic chat. I think we'll definitely get you back on, and we'll dig in deep on the old the business side of things and get into the nitty gritty, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions that'll fall out the back of it, mate. So if you're keen for that, we'll definitely get you back.
Mate.
No worries. So, guys, if you've got any questions, if you want to sort of drop them into the chat box, we'll make sure we get them answered. Sam, if they want to reach out to you, mate, where's the best way for people to reach out to yourself?
Yeah, they can find us on Instagram, Cornwall High Performance, Facebook, Cornwall High Performance. It's super easy. Or email cornwallhighperformance@gmail.com or www.cornwallhighperformance.co.uk. So basically typing in our brand name in any sort of social media channel will get you to us. And yeah, feel free, guys, to reach out, send us any messages, whatnot. We're more than happy to chat and pass on some of our learning experiences from the last few years.
No worries, mate. Right, well, thanks very much again for that, mate. And guys, as always, reach out if you need anything, and we'll catch up again.